Starting. All right, everyone. We are now live.
Okay, we're live.
Amazing.
I need some water. Be right back.
Coffee? You can't just drink all coffee all the time, Jay? Come on.
You can overdose on caffeine.
I've done it before. It's incredibly uncomfortable.
I think I'm close to doing that right now. I've had 3 cups.
Stop drinking coffee. Drink some water.
Noted.
If you take caffeine pills, you could overdose and die.
You at least make yourself vomit like that.
Sorry?
You can definitely.
Say,
Yeah, it's pretty.
One here, like all the here. Oh, we're waiting for Austin. So we're waiting for Austin from Chainsafe, but other than that, everyone else is here. Does everyone want to do a round of introductions real quickly?
that sounds like a good idea.
All right.
My name begins with B. I'll kick it off. I'll turn on my video for just a second, but I'm really sorry I'm stuck in traffic. So once I'm out of this, hopefully I can get on a real thing. But I'm Billy. I'm developer relations engineer at Cosmos. I have a long background with Ethereum. Ethermint was the first thing that attracted me to working with Tendermint. So I'm really excited to see projects beginning to use it. And I'm here to help support any questions that I'm able to answer.
Hey, Billy. Trying to go next, Jack?
Okay, cool. Hey, my name is Jack Samplin, Director of Product over here at Tendermint. Work primarily on the SDK, and right now working towards launching IPC. Jay?
Hi, my name is Jay Kwan. I just woke up, and I worked on Tendermint a long time ago, and now I help Cosmos, and now we're working on other things as well.
Keeping it intentionally vague. Okay, who's next? Jorge?
Yeah, I can go next. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my name is Jorge. I work at Aragon One. Kind of got started with this idea of Aragon Chain at the beginning of the year. It's been like a long road to solidify the research, but it's really exciting to get everything starting to converge and get into the implementation phase. So yeah, really thank you so much for taking the time and the warm welcome that we've received. So yeah, super excited.
Yeah, we're really excited too.
Well, I realize.
Sorry, go ahead, Billy.
Sorry, I cut out on that. I didn't realize somebody else was speaking. I was saying that I didn't realize Aiden was in here. Aiden is with the letter A. Probably should have gone first. You want to go next?
Aiden.
I'm just here passively watching everything. Yeah, my name is Aiden from Chainsafe, but really Greg and Austin are the ones from our team who are here to actively kind of answer questions. So yeah, good to see y'all.
Could you turn on your video just so people know that you're... Or are you not speaking?
Pardon?
Are you speaking?
I'm not going to be. I
Okay.
just was joining to pay it to
Okay.
watch.
And Greg and Austin?
Hey, so I'm Greg, and it's Austin. And yeah, so we'll be answering a lot of the more technical stuff regarding Ethermint, usability, and just about, yeah, anything in that realm.
Okay, and this is Greg and Austin from Chainsafe.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah. We are both from Chainsafe, yes.
Great. Thank you, guys. Okay, and that's everyone who's speaking. And I'm Chjango. Nice to meet you. That's not my real name, but it's what I like to go by. So, and I am into Cosmos. Okay, how about we start with the questions on Aragon forum? Yeah. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. And this is the question from Moyu for us. He's asking about, I think this is a question about Ant or Era. Does anybody else see this?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so maybe this is a question for Jorge from Aragon.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can you ask the question, because I don't have the forum for it. I don't have it.
Can you say that again? You sort of broke up.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, can you repeat the question, because I don't have the forum here.
Okay. So the question is a reply to this statement. The statement says, though the inverse is not true, an increase in price of ANT won't necessarily increase the price of ARA. And his question is, I don't get it. If you have on the one side ARA market cap, and on the other side ANT value, and the ANT value rises, then ARA gets automatically created, and if ANT falls in value, ARA gets automatically burned. ARA tokens get created to pay validators, or how does validators, the Aragon chain, get paid? And do you need ARA for staking, and the 100 validators with the most ARA staked will be validating the Aragon chain? So if the ARA supply gets inflated, then each ARA tokens is worth less and less. To prevent this, more ANT has to be staked. For what do you need ARA tokens? Would it be possible to buy ARA for ETH outside of the bonding curve? If this is possible, then there would be two prices, one bonding curve price and one free floating exchange rate, and then you need market makers. So if the price of ARA goes on the exchange, then it wouldn't be profitable to buy ANT to stake and get ARA to exchange for ETH. That was a question.
Well, yeah, that was a lot of questions. I will try to answer all of them that I remember. I think for the first one, I think the post has this in reverse. I mean, if the basically if the price of ANT goes up, there's like reasons or like speculation that the value of the Aragon chain is not increasing. That would create an incentive. Because basically each ARA would be like backed by more ANT, like in terms of USD or like fiat value. So that would actually create an incentive for validators or ARA holders to actually go to the bonding curve and sell the ARA to the bonding curve and burn the ARA and get ANT in reward in return, because they would be able to sell the ANT. And the other thing happens in reverse. If the price of the chain is going, like if the value of the chain is going up, it's like more profitable to stake. Then it will become rational for people to lock more ANT and like sell it on the market. So yeah, I mean, there will certainly be like the bonding curve price that, and then like I guess that people could trade it on exchanges. Like we're not gonna oppose, like it's not possible to oppose to that. But I think that's fine. There are people that will never interact with the bonding curve, and some people that will just have like arbitrage opportunities, and they will take them. So I don't think that's necessarily bad. Then I think the other big topic was around ARA inflation, and this is something that we're still thinking about, whether is it possible to sustain the security of Aragon Chain just by inflating ARA, because like as this person was saying, if you inflate ERA, then like the backing for like the backing of ANT per ERA token like goes down because you're creating currency artificially. So there's a question of will there be enough speculation on ERA? Because even if we tell people please just buy ERA, like just get ERA if you're gonna validate, like people will do what they do and they will speculate on anything under the sun. And I don't think there's anything that we can do against it. Although I think that should be the rational thing to do. Like if you want to speculate, you just hold ANT and you get like an upside on the value of everything. But if you want to validate, then you get ERA, and like, ideally would have like a very high staking ratio. There's no need for people to trade ERA beyond, like they should be able to just go for ANT. But if people do that and there's enough speculation, maybe there's the chain can sustain itself and we don't have to inject any ANT into the bonding curve to sustain the security of the chain. I mean, ideally, when there's enough fees, then it becomes sustainable just to validate based on the fee market. But initially, that's probably not going to be the case. But yeah, I mean, this is something that is a question whether we will need to inflate ANT as well to sustain ERA inflation. But yeah, we don't know. And I would also love to get input from other people in the call what they think about it, because this is, for me, this is like the biggest open question is whether we're gonna need to inflate ANT to support ERA inflation, or if that ERA inflation is gonna be absorbed away by potential speculators that are just speculating on ERA.
I mean, it makes me think that probably something that could be helpful is using a tool like CAD to maybe model and test some really basic assumptions about different scenarios. Obviously, it's not going to be a perfect system because there's a lot of unknowns in that, but it could be a step in the right direction to sort of figuring out if there's problematic areas that need more examination.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. The problem that I personally have with, I mean, I think like the economics of like ERA being inflated and ANT being inflated or not, I think that it's like pretty intuitive of like how that economic flow is going to work. And I think at the end of the day, it will come down to people being more or less rational in terms of like speculating and like staking and like the value, what value do they perceive from the chain, and like how many fees there are going to be. So I don't think it's a matter of simulation, but like predicting the future. But yeah, I mean, I would happily do that, but I think the model is like really simple and like quite intuitive. So yeah, I think it will come down to what people are going to do, and like I don't trust crypto people to be rational anymore.
Okay. So I think that sufficiently answers the first question. And his second question is in response to this statement. So the statement says most Cosmos proof of stake chains rely on a participation rate targeting mechanism where inflation is dynamically adjusted to ensure some percentage of the supply is actively being staked. And the question is, what is a participation rate targeting mechanism? So there would be an inflation of ERA tokens. Why is there an inflation? What does actively staked mean? All right. Maybe somebody on the Cosmos team could answer this.
Hey, you want to handle those? Or we get them?
I'll start. So in the Cosmos Hub, we use a particular staking system where the staking token is inflated from 7 to 20% a year. And the point is to reward those staking tokens back to only those who are bonded, such that we can target a staking ratio of at least 2/3. And so that's specifically to make that token a staking token, and to ensure that to make it hard for someone like a whale to purchase like a massive amount of staking tokens and just override the system in terms of security, like, you know, getting their validators to start validating and then taking over the network. So when you, in other words, when you have most of the tokens already staked, then a whale will have to, like, you know, it will be more difficult to acquire the staking tokens necessary to attack the system because you have to get them back from the validators and delegators. It's not necessary to do, but we believe that it's a more conservative thing to do for a staking token. So we do it. That's what I got.
Right, like if everybody, if 100% of people are staked, then the inflation amount will be, you know, equal for everybody. So it's like everybody's value will stay the same, you know, because the decrease in value for the token should be proportional to the increase of the inflation. Obviously, this probably wouldn't happen. So that means that anybody who's not staked should be, you know, punished for not staking. And that really, you know, we want to move away from the model that these tokens are actively being traded so much. You know, we want it to be as illiquid as possible so that this whale scenario that Jay described isn't possible. And at the same time, we want to, you know, really support the idea that fees are where the value of being a validator would eventually come from, because that staking token is really, we just want it to only be used for staking. We want all of it to be locked up to secure the network. We don't want a lot in the market where somebody could accrue it silently.
We do need that we do need of a market to, but you don't need to have market liquidity to have a problem.
You're breaking up, Jay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, could you repeat everything you just said?
Sure. I said that Billy's points were excellent, and the only thing I would want to add there is that what is it? It's too early in the morning for me, guys. Oh yeah, you do need a market in order to have a price. So if all the tokens were completely illiquid, then price discovery would be difficult, and then arguably the security of the chain becomes difficult to quantify as well. So you need a little bit of trading. So the Cosmos Hub is to try to target 2/3, not 100%, such that there's enough of a market of Atom tokens as well.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of Aragon Chain, it's like a little bit different. I mean, I completely hear you for Atom, which is like standalone token, but in the case of Aragon Chain, there will always be kind of like an automated market maker in the form of a bonding curve that people can always, I mean, like it will do like some automatic price discovery there, because people can go and like get ARA from staking ANT, or like destroy ARA and get ANT back. So theoretically, I mean, ARA could be 100% stake, and there would be like a price discovery in the form of the bonding curve. I'm not sure if that would be optimal even, but that would happen. So I don't think that there would be a problem in any of those problems if 100% of the supply is staked. I don't think that will happen, because like some people will probably trade this on other exchanges. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like that would work for us too, as long as the bonding curve, it would make it difficult for a whale to acquire the majority of the staking token.
Yeah, I mean, here is like where the bonding curve parameterization comes in, and I think that yeah, that's also going to be a fun thing to figure out, like basically what the shape of the curve is, because like based on that, yeah, you basically need to set the parameter, and it's like, okay, so from that point, like there will be like a staking period in which everyone will get basically the same amount of ARA for each AMT, but after that, it's like actually a curve. So it's like depending on how steep the curve is, it's like more or less difficult for for validators to like for potential 51% attacks of people like staking a shit ton of ANT to get their enough ERA to do an attack. So yeah, that's a matter of parameterization there that really needs to get we really need to get right.
Okay, is that question sufficiently answered? Should we move on to the next one? All right.
There's a good question in the comments in the chat on this Zoom.
Yeah, so we'll get to those questions after we complete answering the forum questions. So yeah, there's only a few more questions on the forum. And this one says, this is the statement: having a high percentage of the supply staked is considered a security and safety advantage because it impacts how quickly the active validator set can change. And the question is, why can you change validator sets more quickly if 67% of ERA is staked? How does the active stake and the speed of changing the validator set correlate? So it's more of a Tendermint question. Perhaps Jay could answer that.
Yeah, I think what the original statement is saying goes along with what we were saying earlier, which is we're trying to slow down like rapid validator set changes, such as today the validator set was these 100, and then tomorrow, or maybe like a few hours from now, suddenly it's a completely different validator set. That's okay, but maybe that's a symptom of an attack, right? So we want to slow that down. So it's not that we want to change validator sets more quickly. We want to make it more expensive. So if anything, a little slower and more expensive for whales to accumulate stake. Over.
Is that a satisfactory answer? Does anyone else have more questions following that? Okay, the next question that the same user asks is, oh man, okay, this is a wall of text. So the statement says, the statement by collateral, a user by the handle collateral says, I'm not sure the relevance here, as the goal wasn't really ever to allow staked jurors to vote in AGPs. It was to try and make ANT the ideal asset to use to collateralize proposal agreements. These are very different goals with different technical challenges. The goal of making it possible to vote with ANT used to collateralize proposal agreements is motivated by the need to make proposal agreements more capital efficient, because in some ways they would be competing with traditional legal ag. The general approach to minimizing volatility is the use of an algorithmic central bank which automatically mints and sells tokens in order to collateralize a reserve, and automatically sells collateral in the reserve in order to support a specific price target. The question is, could you give an example of how this works? This would work by ERA. So maybe Jorge could answer this.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I got the question entirely, but I think it should work in a similar way. I don't think it. I mean, here with all the stake ANT that is like back in ANJ, which is the Aragon Quartz token, or ERA. I mean, all that stake ANT basically needs to vote as like one big block, and we are now. I am personally concerned about having like that big block voting on AGPs, because it would basically be like, imagine that I use this example in some of the other threads, but imagine that you have like 50%, 51% of all ANT is staked for ERA or collateralized in ERA, and then we allow ERA holders to vote. So like a majority vote of ERA holders gets to decide how that 51% block of ANT votes. So effectively, by holding 25% of the total ANT voting power, you basically control a block of 51% of the tokens, which effectively means that you control the entire network. So I'm a little bit scared about that. So that's why I think that ANT that is collateralized in other assets shouldn't vote. And then there's the other question of like who should, for governance proposals that we'll probably do like signaling akin to Cosmos have right now. If that happens, who should be voting on proposals for Aragon Chain? And I think like either ERA holders or ANT holders should. And for Aragon Court, we actually decided that it won't be ANJ holders, so the holders of the work token, they won't be voting on how to parameterize the court. It will be like ANT holders, because that way we kind of create like some sort of separation of powers. That is like, okay, these people like have tokens, but they're basically paying, it's like their collateral in order to work, and it doesn't really make sense that they can use that to vote on how the protocol itself works, because these people, just by holding their token, have like a significant power in the protocol. In the case of the court, it's a little bit even worse. But yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but I think this is more related to Aragon Court, and like more important for that than for.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move on to the next and last question, and then we'll open it up to the questions in the Zoom chat. Hello, welcome person. Okay, so does everyone see this curve, this redemption limit curve? So the question on this is, how will the ANT and ERA bonding curve look like? Like this, and there's an example for anyone who's able to see the screen. Will it be possible to trade ERA directly on exchanges without using the bonding curve? Maybe this is a question for Billy.
Yeah, I don't have the shape like that picture, but yeah, I mean, I guess it will be available on other exchanges other than the bonding curve. There's nothing impeding that. Yeah.
And then attack the network. Yeah, I mean, it sounds a little bit like this topic was covered in an earlier question about whether or not it would be able to be on an exchange. There's nothing stopping from it. It would be probably an arbitrage opportunity for somebody keeping the bonding curve price in sync with other exchanges.
Could you repeat that, Billy? That wasn't completely clear. So Billy,
sorry about that. Yeah, if the question is whether or not it's possible. What was that, Chjango?
You're muting in and out.
Can you all hear me right now?
Yep.
Cool. I was just saying, it sounds like the question is about whether or not the token can exist on other exchanges, and there's no reason it wouldn't be able to. It sounds like it would probably be something like an arbitrage opportunity for anybody who's seeing the bonding curve price be different from another exchange. They could, either buy or sell on the bonding curve to adjust that, the way that Uniswap kind of works. So technically, it seems like there's no reason that they wouldn't be able to exist on other exchanges. Whether or not it's good for the token or bad for the token, I think is another sort of question and topic, or whether it's necessary if the bonding curve is liquid enough is another sort of question.
Well, if there's arbitrage opportunity, there will be more transaction, I believe. More usage of the token. Okay, let's go to the chat, shall we? So Luke Duncan asks, this is related to the bonding curve mechanism. An increase in price and market cap for ERA will result in more ANT locked up. On the other hand, if the price of ANT increases, the price of ERA won't increase long term. Arbitrageurs will likely sell or burn ERA, reducing the ERA supply to bring the bonding curve ratio back into balance. I love this mechanism, though interested to hear from the Cosmos folks about the tax effect of this type of inflation. And is there any work being done to achieve the same result in a more tax efficient manner?
I'm not sure I understand the use of the word tax in that. Is Luke actually on the call though? Could he elaborate?
I think that the question here is that because of the way rewards are paid out now within the Cosmos Hub, they're taxed as income. So how would we have them taxed more like investments? I think a lot of the work around collateralizing the I had an answer to this like 2 minutes ago. I slipped my mind. But the work that like Certus and Chorus are doing on sort of being able to group together a bunch of bonds and sell tranches of, or like when a delegator delegates to a validator, it creates a bond. If you take each one of those bonds has a different risk profile. If you take them all together and you cut it up into tranches, you can sort of like spread the risk appropriately. It's called collateralization. So collateralizing those together and changing the way that the cash flows come out would be one way to change the tax treatment of those assets. I do know that Certus One folks, I believe, have been working on that for a little while. Mayor had a proposal that he was pushing up to the hub. I don't know what the current status on that is, but I do know that there's active discussion in the community about addressing this issue. So hopefully that answers the question after a bit of a rambling there. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah, I just want to add that I don't think we know how the Atom token, the inflation of the Atom token will be treated in the Cosmos Hub by tax authorities. It's bonded, and then like if everyone wants, if 100% of tokens were bonded, and then more tokens were being inflated, and they were being given back to the stakers, and like imagine those inflationary Atom tokens auto bonded, in which case like there's nothing changing because your percentage ownership, say, or stake in the system has not changed or does not change over time. So in that case, there's something there's something in the U.S. tax code about like equity and what is it? Like a stock split, right? Where you might, everybody might have, you know, like some number of shares, and then after the stock split, they might have twice the number of shares. That's not a taxable event. So I think there's an argument to be made to the IRS that we need to take this into consideration. Anyways, that's like a side thing, but I guess the point I wanted to make is
that sounds super interesting. Is there like a link to reference material on that?
The stock split?
Yeah, that whole like thread sounds incredible.
Oh yeah, unfortunately I'm not aware of, but we should make one. Yeah, sorry, I don't know if there's any central resource where we're discussing tax consequences, but we should probably start doing that. At the point I wanted to make is I'm not a tax authority. It seems that we're designing things that may be difficult to construe. So I think it's important to consider how tax authorities will be treating these things before we design them. But sometimes you might have to wade into some gray area. I hate the tax. You know, we should have like 1,000 blockchains that just like auto tax. You know, every blockchain should just figure out taxes automatically, and we should maybe just create a voluntary tax system. This all sucks.
Big next steps. But yeah, it sounds like if you just Google stock splitting, that's probably a beginning on that thread, Luke.
Okay, do we have any other questions? feel free to raise your hand. I think there is a raise your hand function in Zoom itself. So if you have another question, go ahead and speak up. Otherwise, we could start opening up questions between, speakers. I'm sure a couple of us have questions to Aragon and to Chainsafe and vice versa about how things are being implemented. So. Okay, so I guess that's the end of the Q&A. And if anybody who is speaking has questions for the other team while everyone is still online, let's do it.
Yeah, actually, it's something that I wanted, because I've been talking to Greg a little bit about bridging to mainnet Ethereum before IBC and Ethereum Pexon comes online. Yeah, basically different approaches to do that. There's like the POA multi-sig style bridging, but I guess like it could also be done by like including sort of like an Ethereum-like client in the chain and having like validators also, like kind of like the ETH2 style for bridging from ETH1 to ETH2. So yeah, basically like what are your thoughts regarding the best way to bridge mainnet Ethereum to a Cosmos SDK chain before the Pexon is live?
IXO is a project who created a successful bridge almost a year ago on their Cosmos SDK based chain that used Ethereum as a root of trust. I'm not sure exactly the spec. Probably it's similar to a POA system, but I mean, while I think there are a few different loopholes you can jump through to make that work, I feel like IBC is so close, it might be worth it just to use that instead. I'm not sure what sort of exact features or timeline would be necessary for that kind of system.
Luke, sorry.
Yeah, just to comment on that, I guess it just comes down to like timing of actually Aragon Chain, right? So, when do we want to get it running? When do we actually want to deploy? How long has IBC been battle tested? I guess those are kind of like relevant questions to understanding why and when we need a bridge. So I guess kind of like as time plays out, we'll find out.
No. And actually the implementation of a peg zone, even with IBC, could be used without IBC in a very effective way.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It'll be interesting with IBC. I mean, like one of the cool things with the projected plans with the Aragon Chain is obviously being able to like control your DAOs and do stuff with your DAOs while you're like signing on Ethereum. Obviously that makes IBC like super, that's like where IBC becomes really useful. But internally, if we have to use a bridge, we might have to use a bridge. To answer,
I mean, it would probably, I was just going to say, probably it would make sense with IBC as well that Aragon would be running a peg zone for legacy Ether or Ether 1.x. Because, I mean, there's been a implementation of a one-way peg from a group called Swish Labs who received an ICF grant, and they're close to finishing the two-way peg. And there's been a couple other, peg zone implementations out there, but it doesn't really answer the question, who will operate like a general peg zone, and if there will be multiple general peg zones, or if we're going to see every sort of project who wants a peg zone will just sort of run one just restricted to their own token or to their own use case. But it's something that I'm excited about seeing is what are the different peg zone paths we're going to have, because it seems like there would be a variety of possibilities, each one with their own sort of security considerations, each one with their own uses or their own clientele. Aragon might be, a very viable version of those.
Yeah, that'd be super cool. Yeah, to answer Luke's question in the chat, Luke's asking, what is like kind of like essentially dev tooling, and or like wallet, block explorers, stuff like that, and like how does support look like within Ethermint. So I can speak on math. Sure. Yeah, basically what we've done is we've created a shim of like the Web3 API or an adapter, however you want to look at it, on top of Ethermint. And what that does is it allows basically the existing like Web3.js or Ethers.js to natively work with within Ethermint. So basically you just point, you know, the URL to the node instead of doing, you know, whatever, let's say using Fira, you would just point it to a Ethermint node and your whole thing will work out of the box. Now, obviously, we had some challenges, and we had to do some tricks because like things like the codecs are different. You know, it's amino encoding. Yeah, it's like amino encoding on you know, on the Tendermint side where we use RLP and Ethereum. So we had to do some like little tricks there. Also, like some data doesn't actually exist like one-to-one. So we had to like kind of like analyze and go look at it and say like, hey, what data makes the most sense to basically like be able to do this. So we've basically made it so that the results returned shouldn't break dApps. Naturally, you know, this is gonna be an iterative process. So we're gonna have to figure out, you know, did something like weird occur? What was it? You know, and we'll just go and fix it and make a patch. We've implemented a shim for pretty much almost all of the API methods, focused on like the most commonly used ones. Things like get proof, you know, we've left like till later. And, you know, so we're that's how we've been solving that issue. So like things like MetaMask would work out of the gate. You just have to go to custom URL in the dropdown and like repoint it. Wallets and chains supporting multiple in the same UI. The new MetaMask plugin system actually solves this. So it's going to be in beta probably for a year, unfortunately, but we could, you know, if people that are signed up, we'd be more than happy to, you know, explore actually getting a plugin made, in which what you would do is we could support like an Ethermint or just in Cosmos in general through a plugin. So that way you can do all your signing and everything directly through MetaMask. I would highly advise looking up the plugin. I think they posted it, MetaMask posted their slides on it from DevCon. It's honestly quite revolutionary in that home. So that'll help a lot with the signing stuff. But I'm not too sure of too many. I mean, with a dApp, like all you would have to do is just repoint the URL. Sorry, there's another question. Is there a doc on all of these?
If I just touch on like one.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So basically a couple key points like to mention is that you're using the same keys. So basically you're using the Ethereum style addressing. So you can use the same key to interact on Ethermint, and you can use the same key that you would be using on Ethereum. The other part, I guess, is like the shims that we've done, like they should all work, and like the ones that I've tested, because I mainly test this stuff through the Web3 API. I'm not sure every interaction. It's quite hard to test every single use case of the Web3 API. But I see the only issue with that is if like there's sanity checks. Like there is one small issue with Ethers is that there's a sanity check with like the encoding style. They just like verify that it is RLP encoded, the transaction hash. But like things like that there can be workarounds and there can be solutions. We just have to like find out what they are, and that's just through testing.
Yeah, and is there a doc with all the shims and method? No, but we can generate one probably pretty easily just by scraping the file, pulling the function names. But they work like one-to-one existing. And yeah, the ethers thing is something we're actually investigating. So the thing is when you send a transaction, yeah. So when you send a transaction, it takes back the returned hash and tries to basically re-verify that like, in fact, the returned hash is what it sent. And obviously it's not because it's amino encoded. So we're working on a way to make it work. It's a bit challenging.
And just one last point about that is everything else is RLP encoded coming into the API. So that's why you can use the same data as previously, but it just like decodes it. And then when it sends the transaction, that's the only thing. It's still using amino encoding for the actual Cosmos like zone, but that can be changed. You can change the encoding if necessary, if absolutely necessary.
Amino encoding is just the codec chosen for Tendermint. It's the same thing as RLP and Ethereum. It's just done in a different manner. You're welcome, Gabriel. Yeah. So nice part is everything should work right out of the gate. And if it doesn't, it'll be a really obviously big failure right on the UI side that we should be able to identify. And we should be able to get a fix in really quickly because it's fairly intuitive. You know, once we just identify the issue, most of them shouldn't be too hard.
That is really exciting.
Yeah. It's nice because it immediately opens up access to basically all existing tooling. So things like Truffle, everything, right? Just works should work right out of the gate, which that's a big win, I think.
And if there is sanity checks that we need to get around, those are pretty easy.
Yeah.
I mean, like the proof of work stuff shouldn't be relied on, but if it is, then we can just, find a workaround for it. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
Sweet.
seems like it would be logical.
Yeah. Like some of those would be kind of trivial. Like if like you're using something for like if they're using like a proof of work for randomness or something like that, which probably isn't even great anyway. Like we could just, come up with our own solution for that. It's just a matter of like identifying the use case of why that person's using it for that reason, and then figuring out how we can better adapt it to make it match from whatever Tendermint's giving us and giving us access to. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, we're more than happy to dive into like how we did Ethermint and like weird gotchas we found along the way if there's anything. Questions related to that.
But basically, the moral of what we're saying is, I mean, like we're welcome. Like if someone wants to deploy their contracts and test it, I'm more than happy to work with people to figure out these solutions. Because like I don't know every use case, so if you could use it for what you need, and then I can fix those problems. That's basically the best way to go about it.
Also, if anybody has like a their test suite actually can be pointed to a node, that would be super useful, because then we could quite literally just spin up an EVM node, point it to, instead of pointing it to like what normally people would point to like Ganache, we can just point to an Ethermint node, and then we can actually do a full check. And while your test suite passed, then I would hope to think that we returned you all the correct and valid information, which means then the API is working. I think that'd be probably the best way to actually do a verification to ensure that you're, before running on Ethermint, like if you can run your test suite against it, then it's you should be good to go right at the gate.
I've got a question for maybe somebody from the Aragon team. As an implementation of the EVM, potentially, any Solidity code could be deployed. Will there be an active effort to restrict the contracts that get deployed to Aragon-based apps, or will it be sort of like a soft restriction? Like, what are the thoughts about things that are not strictly DAOs getting?
Can you repeat your question, Billy? Just a little.
Sure. I was just thinking, and maybe I'm also wrong in my assumptions about how the Aragon chain will work. I'm assuming that it's going to be a single chain that has the Ethermint EVM, and that's where you would expect Solidity-style Aragon DAOs to be deployed. I was just wondering if there was any intention or thoughts about restricting deployments of Solidity to only Aragon-based contracts, or if there is that sort of like a soft restriction, or what are the thoughts around that?
Yeah, absolutely not. It needs to be absolutely permissionless for people to deploy. And we've actually, after the announcement, we've been getting interest from people, and some people have been asking about it, and I think we should be more clear in our communication. This is a public EVM chain that people can do whatever they want with it. We will also be very explicit about that. The Aragon community controls the chain, and even though we're not 100% sure about what the governance, on chain, off chain governance, all that for the chain should be, but at the end of the day, it would belong to the Aragon community. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Aragon community says, okay, there's this very a very stupid example, we rely on checkpointing type things for mini-me tokens to prevent double voting, and I wouldn't be surprised because that's a bit intensive in terms of gas costs, if the Aragon community says, okay, let's build that checkpointing of values natively so that can be cheaper. So there would be a little advantage to some of the primitives that Aragon uses that could eventually be implemented natively as opcodes or precompiles, so to make it cheaper to do some of the things that Aragon heavily relies on. But I want to be absolutely clear that this is totally permissionless public blockchain that everyone can do whatever they want with it. I mean, I don't know what parts of the Aragon community would run validators, and some people may decide to include certain transactions for free to incentivize use. I mean, this is like pure speculation, but no, people can do whatever they want with the chain. There's not gonna be any soft restriction even, and let alone any hard restriction. Um, I mean, I've been spending a lot of time. Yeah, sorry, I've been thinking a lot of time, like, because we've been building on Ethereum for 3 years as like layer 2 or like app developers, and we have a bunch of ideas of protocol level changes that would improve UX tremendously. Like something that immediately comes to mind is like meta transactions, like separating the user that signs a transaction or like sending some message because they want to do something, and who's paying for the gas or for the fee. Like that immediately comes to mind. So there are like ideas for protocol level improvements that would increase UX enormously, that come from our experience building on and like suffering some of the Ethereum shortcomings that we would like to implement. But I think it's really important that we keep the Aragon chain like completely backwards compatible. So like any contract that you may be able to deploy to Ethereum, you're not only welcome, but you shouldn't need to worry about any implications of stuff that could be broken just because you're deploying to Aragon chain. So I think we should approach this with the same amount of thoughtfulness when people introduce like an EIP, and it's like thinking about, okay, what are the implications to all the contracts. I'm also like not opposed to removing some stupid restrictions and some hacks of the Ethereum protocol, as that stipend that particularly burned us. But yeah, sorry for the long answer. TLDR, people should be able to do whatever they want with Aragon chain, as long as they pay the fees and convince validators to include their transactions.
Very cool. Very cool.
Proposal. If you have the social contract that chain migrations or upgrades out of this like Ethermint zone will happen over at least a duration of a month, as an example, and everyone deploys their contracts such that if they're given notice, they can all pull their funds out, then at least you can ensure that everyone can migrate out of the system. And there's like a way to terminate this chain so that you can move on to the next like version of the chain. You know what I mean? Maybe it's not a month, maybe it's like a year. So I feel like a lot of these Ethermint deployments are going to require social contracts or prior contracts where you say, when you can deploy whatever contract you want, but make sure that you can get your tokens out within a certain amount of time. I feel like that would be a good practice to have. That way, we don't have to maintain a large, arbitrary Ethermint or a smart contract stay forever, which might become a more burden than we want to deal with in the future. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's super reasonable, and like maybe the another thing that we've been thinking a lot about is like, okay, like at the end of the day, the security of Aragon chain is like gonna be a function of market cap, but kind of like a good argument in favor of like a more, at least the beginning of a more like POA style bridge, is that if there's any problem in the chain, both like security problem, like gets 51% attacks, or like technical problem, is that so long as you're able to close the bridge and like be like, okay, we don't know what's going on here, let's close the bridge, figure out our shit, and then like open it up, and like you can like do like arbitrary like regular state transitions in the chain, or whatever you may need to do. I think that's very interesting, and it also comes down to that what you were saying, that you can like kill the chain and like do all sorts of crazy shit, so long as like the external value of like things that happen in the chain don't touch other chains. Because like if it touches Ethereum, then it becomes like impossible to revert things. So yeah, this is something that we've also been thinking about a little bit. Actually, I have another question for the Cosmos / Tendermint team. Because I remember that there were plans of like launching like an Ethermint chain with like a hard spoon and so on. Like, what are the current plans around that, or timeline for launching that?
Well, one thing we're waiting for is for Ethermint to be ready. And then we're looking for collaborators to help on exactly that project. I mean, it should really be like a community-driven effort, right? It's the latest plan for the Photon token is to, and by plan we mean like proposal, right? Like it's not like our company that's necessarily doing it or any individual so far, but to use Ethermint such that you can run all the smart contracts, so you can have a zone that is a copy of this fork of the Ethereum state, no plans yet. It will launch. We'll see. Anyone can make a proposal. So
yeah, I think we've been prioritizing things within the company that we see people in the community want, and there hasn't been, a lot of active discussion or demand to prioritize Ethermint chain or the plasma, the Photon hard spoon. But yeah, it's more like community wants it. Let's build it as a community. Let's try to prioritize it. And it seems like it hasn't been a hot topic. Mostly, I think people want IBC.
Yeah, to speak
where should
on
people go to record? I'm sorry, I just had a question. This can come at the end. I'm asking all of us, where should we coordinate to be discussing as a community the Photon token? Maybe like the Cosmos forums.
Cosmos forums where discussions taken place before on that topic, right?
Yeah. So Greg,
Yeah.
Austin had a question.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to comment on the whole, I was just going to call the hard spoon kind of like stuff. So as it stands, like you wouldn't be starting from scratch if anybody did want to contribute to that. There's currently like a test utils functions that exist that basically actually do the block importing. There's still a lot of work to actually be done on it. Unfortunately, but like it's got a good baseline, and it kind of starts like importing the blocks. It doesn't validate the state header that it's actually correct and stuff. There's a bunch of like little stuff, but it works. So there's somewhere to like start with. Should anybody choose to want to try that out? See you later, Jay.
So to sum up, there's a bunch of tooling that exists, and anybody can pick it up. And we should use the Cosmos forum to continue conversations about moving forward with photons if people are interested in hard spooning Ethereum. Cool. All right. It is 1 hour into the AMA. Let's wrap up. Are there any final questions? I've got a question for the Chainsafe guys. Tell us about your developer experience building out Ethermint and what that was like.
It's been good. There's a lot of very cool stuff in Cosmos. I like working with it. There's just a lot of like very tedious and like things you kind of have to, I guess, shim like with working with Web3 and like coming from Ethereum and kind of making these two fully scaled out systems, mesh together, especially since there's the discrepancy between proof of work and proof of stake. It's been an interesting project just because there's a lot of cool stuff in obviously both projects. And I see a lot of potential for it, but it hasn't been the cleanest process just because these are huge systems that you're trying to merge and have every existing workflow still, functional on the new chain.
I think something like really awesome that's come out of it is that we've provided like a pretty significant amount of feedback back towards like the Cosmos team. like on basically like modularity. There's a lot of modularity stuff. Kind of like the difference between like exposing a variable publicly or privately is also, you know, been a big topic with us because it's a lot of stuff like that. You know, have we PR'd back into Cosmos? We almost have a couple times.
Just the modules thing.
Yeah. But there's been a lot of like learning experiences to see like how modular is Cosmos, the SDK right now, and like how much can we actually like steal from it, and how can we like exploit it. So I think that's been like a nice learning curve for it. It's like we've gotten to learn the Cosmos SDK more thoroughly simply by having to like, because of the shims, you know, because we're shimming everything and trying to figure out like how can we hack this together. You know, that's definitely been something. So I think that's, for me at least, the better part. We got to contribute back to Cosmos and not just build Ethermint.
That's great.
Yeah.
My impression.
Yeah, we love that. We love that.
Yeah, because I think it's something that like, you know, not a lot of people are going to be able to do or have the opportunity to do. You guys kind of like get, you know, you're kind of like on your own to a certain degree. Not everybody's like diving this deep when they're using Cosmos. So I think it's a good opportunity to actually like understand pain points and stuff like that.
And are people able to use the shims if they wanted to build something that was compatible between anything Web3 and Cosmos related?
Yeah, we could expose it. I mean, it could be importable in theory, yeah, because it works directly against Tendermint.
Yeah, there's just some other things.
There's some nuances.
Yeah, like for example, like proof of work obviously relies on block hash because without block finality, but obviously in a proof of stake system, it's completely different when you're referencing by numbers. So there's like certain shims like that I'm not sure will always be a thing depending on which, you know, chain you run on. But like the shims can be somewhat generalized, and like it's just maybe something that I would go through and document all the changes and, you know, figure out if
we could probably isolate them too and export like Tendermint specific shims, so the ones that like don't require an EVM and just kind of require like Tendermint querying essentially. That could probably work. But yeah, like in theory, yes, we could do that. Yeah.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, would somebody who's working with both stacks, the Ethereum and the Cosmos stacks, would it be better for them to just use Ethermint or use the shims that you built?
There's just a lot of infrastructure built around the Web3 API. So like a lot of people have all that development stuff done. So it makes it easier in the short term to do that, but it could be better to kind of do that just through Cosmos and not have to use shims.
Now that we're speaking about it though, there's actually an interesting point to be made here. If Cosmos were to perhaps integrate natively some of these shims, you could get direct support for UIs. So like, for instance, like key signing stuff, because we've actually made key signing for Ethereum keys work. In theory, you could sign on Cosmos with your Ethereum key through like MetaMask, and it would work right out of the gate.
That's very, very cool.
Yeah, right. So, you know, if you don't think smart contracting, think more or less like key signing and like all the other stuff that like the Web3 API provides, like querying. Like you could get a block explorer running if you did integrate these natively onto the Cosmos API.
Yeah, like that's kind of a, I guess, important point is that that's something that I guess can be explored to like try to merge into Cosmos to add the modularity of key signing, because I basically had to create like a duplicate of the key management stuff through Cosmos to allow you to use the exact same key and exact same encoding, exact same addressing as Ethereum. But it would be useful because I think a lot of people do want to use their existing, you know, Ethereum keys, and it's on the same curve. It just has different, you know, addressing and signing. So it would be useful.
Yeah, and I think the really neat part actually is like you could probably get an Ethereum block explorer to work for just general Cosmos stuff with that API if it wasn't merged in natively. I haven't thought about that until now.
Because it does just interact with Tendermint itself.
Yeah.
So like it is possible.
Yeah, like we could probably just make a core, as I was saying, like a core Tendermint suite of API methods that work.
Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, shims are cool.
Love it. Cool. Is that a good note to wrap it up on?
Yep. Does anyone else have any final questions before we go?
Yeah, if you're gonna interact with Tendermint, Ethermint, and ship breaks, please make an issue. And like, I'm assuming there's the based on the API, there's gonna be like some problems. And like if you have a test suite that runs against like Ganache or a live node, please send it our way. We'll do the testing if we know how to run it, because it will help us out greatly.
I'd like to try that with my Clover's code base. I'll work on that. Thank you, everybody.
One or two small issues that should be resolved before like it's completely. There is like one or two small things, but I'm sure that'll be resolved within a week or so. Just like minor things.
Cool.
Yeah, and
it should be all functional.
And knowing if the difference between Web3 and Ethers is like huge for us. Preferably start with Web3.js, simply just because compatibility reasons with the checksum, the sanity check that Ethers has. But otherwise, yeah, like if we can do that, let's do it.
Duly noted. Thanks, everybody.
Ciao. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.